Digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard.
So, yeah. So so here it is. He's calling it out. They're doubling down on it now, and they're doing this under the guise of we are trying to protect Romania and the European Union from extremism from the right. Well, what could be more extreme than canceling democratic elections, barring opposition to the winner of that election from running again, putting people in jail for protesting Israel, and then literally funding Nazis, legit Nazis in Ukraine. So they're actually the thing they claim to be fighting against. Am I wrong?
Well, there's a basic fact that adds on to this, which is that every European politician that has supported the NATO expansion to Ukraine and the war in Ukraine is incredibly unpopular. We started by listening with Marie Le Pen. Macron has an approval rating of about 20%. Starmer in the UK has an approval rating of around 20%. Scholz, who until this moment is now caretaker chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, just lost with the worst outcome of the Social Democratic Party in more than a century, has an approval rating of about 20%. The Europeans are disgusted with all of this. This isn't a popular cause. This is a small elite group of politicians running against common sense, European interest, and public opinion, all of them. And so that's why they're canceling this candidate in Romania. He wants to stop the war. And in the neighborhood where he is, you have Robert Fico, who is the prime minister of Slovakia. You have Viktor Orban, who's been for years completely right about every word he said about what would happen with the Ukraine war. And Romania, wants to express the same thing in public opinion, and they're being blocked to do so. So this is a phenomenon straight across Europe right now. This is an incredibly unpopular war. It's been terrible for the European economy, after all, which had a normal trading relationship with Russia, which the American deep state hated. That's why we blew up the damn pipeline. And broke their energy system, broke the German industrial base. And the mainstream politicians continue in this crazy way until this moment. Even with Trump giving the exit ramp for all of this, they can't understand to take it.
And so, again, who's controlling these people? They're not responsive to their own electorate, to their own citizens. So what is possibly in it for them? I mean, they let them blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, which has tanked the European economy. I mean, Germany, which is the economic engine, has been paying 2, 3, 4 times the price for energy, and they're in what they call it's a recession. They call it a contraction. What is the possible? Is there a small cabal of people at the WF controlling all of Europe or something?
I don't know. One of my beautiful young granddaughters just said, well, Grandpa, maybe it's that they don't want to admit that they were wrong. So we were having a discussion about this. The politicians do not know how to fold a losing hand because they don't know the fallacy of sunk costs, which means if you've lost, you get out of the game. They don't understand that because they'd have to admit that the last 3 years was a debacle, a hideous set of errors. Why is Zelensky, who's supposed to represent, quote, the interests of the Ukrainian people, why is he dragging people out of cars, sending them to the front lines to die when a clear majority of Ukrainians want the war to end, even with territorial concessions? They say that in the opinion polls that we're seeing in recent weeks. But Zelensky rules by martial law, won't admit it, and probably because, as an individual, he has a lot of responsibility in this. Of course, Biden has much greater responsibility because when Zelensky was ready to talk peace with the Russians in April 2022, it was Biden and Boris Johnson that said, no, don't do that. We have your back. And that's what has led to an extra 1 million casualties of the Ukrainians dead and seriously wounded since then.
So Scott Ritter says that we should sanction Romania, target the government, courts, and the intelligence services. No mercy. We claim to be defenders of democracy, then let us defend democracy. Either Georgescu is allowed to participate in the election or the Romanian government is overthrown. Do the right thing.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Basically, I don't want us to overthrow any governments. I don't want us to be involved in Romanian internal politics. I want us to stop the war on our side. I want us to give our best suggestion to the Europeans: stop fighting. The truth is, by the way, when the United States stops fighting, the Europeans can't continue the war anyway. This is just a simple mechanics of funds and ammunition and targeting and missiles. I don't want the United States overthrowing any more governments, frankly. I don't want us determining or saving or dissing or dumping anyone's democracy. I just want us to stop this behavior. We've led to too many wars, too many overthrows, too many regime change operations. So with all due respect to Scott Ritter, it's a tragedy. We can say so, but I don't want us to do more than that.
How do you see it? I mean, are you good at predictions? How do you see this ending up?
I think the war is about to end in Ukraine because if Trump doesn't get dissuaded by our own deep state, if he stays as resolute as he has been in recent weeks, if Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, and others stay as clear as they have been, the war is about to end. It cannot continue without U.S. support. So that's the first point. I hope, by the way, frankly, to change the subject a little bit, that he could see the same thing in the Middle East. We should not be fighting Netanyahu's wars, period. That man has gotten the United States into more wars than anybody else, as far as I'm concerned. And we don't need wars with Iran. We don't need wars with China. We don't need to support Israel's wars. We need to stop this. We've got enough issues to deal with of our own. And Trump is right on Ukraine, and I want him to be as right on the other regions as well.
So this is happening currently in Syria, as predicted for many years, not only by Tulsi Gabbard, but people like you and people like this show, which shows it's not hard to predict. If I can figure it out, that's what I've always told people. I'm a C student, and if I can figure it out, then the people who run
you
things,
do a pretty good job.
I appreciate that. So what's happening right now is the jihadists. So the Al-Qaeda basically has taken over Syria. And we've said that if you get rid of Assad, do you know who he's fighting against? He's fighting against Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Islamic terrorists, and that's who's going to take over. And that's exactly who's taken over. And now they're massacring 1,000 Alawites and Christian men and women and children. And I just want to, this is what Tulsi Gabbard had to say. Now, here's a senator giving it to her, saying that when she speaks the truth about Syria, she was repeating Russian talking points. Let's watch. This is from her confirmation hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard, when Russia was denying us use of chemical weapons, they accused the U.S. of supporting terrorists. This is a line that Putin used frequently during the Syrian civil war as he supported Assad. Syrian officials made similar comments. They did it repeatedly. They did it in public. They did it at the United Nations. In 2016, you gave an interview in which you said, and this is a quote, "The U.S. is providing direct and indirect support to terrorist groups in order to overthrow the Syrian government." And in 2019, on the Democratic presidential debate stage, you said of President Trump, this is a quote, "This current president is continuing to betray us. We were supposed to be going after al-Qaeda, but over years now, not only have we not gone after al-Qaeda, our president is supporting al-Qaeda." So I'm interested to hear, what was your goal in saying these things, and did you consider before?
What's your goal in telling the truth about what's happening there?
The motives of Iran and Russia.
Something?
Isn't that what's your goal? Why would you want to tell?
Ain't that something to tell the truth? What did you mean by that? They can't figure that out in Washington.
What's in it for you to tell the people the truth? Somebody who's actually in the military. Well, here's what she said.
Their motives might have been before making these claims.
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DoD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at, and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like al-Qaeda taking power. I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It
is certainly not in our interests.
I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Again, so if you tell the truth about what's happening, they'll just say, well, you sound like Russian, or you sound like you're Iranian, you sound like our enemies. So telling the truth now, that's what they do. They say you're a traitor. They said this during the Iraq War, which is just amazing to see it be repeated over and over, especially right now as they're slaughtering Christians and Alawites, and they're filming it, and it's all over social media. I can't show it here, but it's all over the place. I mean, that's just, it's demoralizing to me, and this is exactly how it played out. And American people don't know that al-Qaeda is running Syria. Take it where you want.
I think there are many things to be said about this. First, thank God for Tulsi Gabbard. She is the best. And you saw, she is so impressive. I've known her for a long time. She speaks the truth. She's incredibly intelligent. Incredibly straightforward and honest. So this is one shocking piece of good news, I would say, that she's head of national intelligence right now. So that's one good piece. The sad part is, everything she said was exactly right, which is that the overthrow of Assad started with Obama. Timber Sycamore is a CIA operation to overthrow Assad. I know, by the way, in a very special way, the war in Syria could have ended in peace 12 years ago, but the U.S. blocked it because their mission was the overthrow of Assad. They weren't interested in peace. It was the overthrow of Assad. Now, it's also important for people to understand, it's not that Assad fell and al-Qaeda filled in the vacuum. We made al-Qaeda, please. Everyone needs to understand this. This goes back 46 years now, by the way. It goes back to Afghanistan, 1979, actually to an idea of Zbig Brzezinski. And Zbig Brzezinski's idea was, we will support what was called the Mujahideen, the Islamic fighters in Afghanistan, and that will torment the Soviet Union. It will be a lure to bring the Soviet Union into an invasion of Afghanistan that will become the Soviet Vietnam. That was his concept. We made the al-Qaeda idea. We worked alongside Osama bin Laden. We hired the troops. We trained them. We armed them. Afterwards, we've used these jihadists again and again. The CIA has used them as its fighters on the ground in these various wars. Another thing people need to understand, these have been Bibi's wars. This is extremist Israeli government policy to which the U.S. has been, and I'm going to use a term advisedly, subservient to the Israeli government. This is not America's interest. But it's Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, who said with his American neocon buddies, who said 7 wars, we need to take out all of Israel's foes. That is Libya, that's Somalia, that's Sudan, that's Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran. 7 he wanted. We've done 6. It's left a bloodbath across the region. It's destabilized the Middle East. It has left a massive destruction of our budget, a massive debt, how many people dead and wounded, including our own veterans. It's done all of that. And that's been Bibi's wars. And I hope, my God, I hope Trump figures out to have American foreign policy, not Israeli foreign policy, because that is absolutely part of this long, long saga. So none of this is an accident. It's all stupid. It's all horrible. It doesn't work the way they think, that you invade Iraq and suddenly it's an American center of power. You invade Syria and try to overthrow Assad, and somehow you get something that is quote, pro-Israel or pro-the United States, or you topple Libya. Every one of these places is in civil war right now. Sudan, we broke Sudan in 2, again at the behest of this vision of taking out all of Israel's enemies, broke Sudan in 2, got North Sudan, South Sudan. Each one has a civil war right now. Sudan in the north and South Sudan, each one has a terrible civil war. We've just been a destructive, mindless machine, this war machine that keeps revving. And that's what this is all about. And these senators, shame on them. Shame on them for even the way that they talk to Tulsi Gabbard. Oh, you're repeating Russian propaganda. Oh, and then he said in closed room, even maybe Iranian propaganda. How about the truth, Senator? Come on.
So here, just to back up what you were saying, WikiLeaks revealed this a long time ago, that Hillary Clinton says Israeli intelligence says collapse of Syria will spark a Sunni Shiite war that will benefit Israel. So there it is. That was back in 2018.
And Jimmy, there's so much evidence coming to light because people are talking now. There's a wonderful book by an Air Force commander, Dennis Fritz. He wrote it last year. It's called Deadly Betrayal. He had an inside view of how the Iraq War came about. And he read all the background papers because he was asked to help declassify papers so that Douglas Feith could write his memoirs, for heaven's sake. And he read all the background papers 20 years ago, and he concluded, hey, this is Bibi's war. The American people were never told about this, but he wrote a book last year explaining it in detail. And so there's a lot of this that's coming to be understood right now. And I'm just pleading that that Donald Trump pull us out of this morass. We should not be fighting Israel's wars, period.
I just want to show people. So the jihadists, which include foreign fighters as well as the ruling HTS means that's Al-Qaeda. They just rebranded themselves. They're just going into homes of non-Sunnis and massacring whole families. That's what they're doing. The terrorists haven't been shy about uploading their killings on the internet as well as live streams. Men, women, children, even babies are being brutally murdered. But instead of calling out the obvious ethno-religious genocide unfolding, the European Union had the audacity to issue this statement. The European Union strongly condemns the recent attacks, reportedly by pro-Assad elements, on interim government forces in the coastal areas of Syria and all violence against. So what the European Union is doing is siding with Al-Qaeda. They're siding with Al-Qaeda in Syria, who are now slaughtering, as predicted, Christians, Alawites, anybody non-Sunni, and they're videotaping it and uploading it to social media. That's what's happening right now.
Very IDF of them.
That's very IDF of them. They're doing that in Syria, and they're Western-backed, meaning the United States did this. The guy who's running Syria right now was up until 5 seconds ago, we had a $10 million reward for his capture because he ran Al Qaeda. And so, but they don't want you to know Timber Sycamore was the CIA funding Al Qaeda and ISIS and all these Islamic terrorists inside Syria to overthrow Assad. So why? Well, at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu, and they want to put a pipeline there from Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They want to put a pipeline through Syria, and Syria is aligned with Russia. Russia wants to have. They want to be selling natural gas. They don't want to have this competition. So again, it comes down to economics. These are all economic wars about fossil fuels. That's what this is all about once again. And now we're in bed with Al Qaeda, so we can do the bidding of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and do the bidding of Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And that's what this is all about. And anything you want to add to that, Kurt?
Yeah. First of all, stop dead naming HTS. Call them Al Qaeda. But you see how they try to bury it, how the language, how wormy it is to bury it so it's the most bland. We condemn the recent attacks by the pro-Assad elements on the interim government force. Nothing about kids and women and children in there or civilians. And then not even Al Qaeda, it's HTS.
Yes.
Another 3-letter word, like a moniker that is easy to confuse with another one. So they just bury this with their language alone. They specially design language to make you not think about ethnic cleansings they don't want you thinking about.
And here's that's what the European Union says. And here's the truth. An Eastern Orthodox Church priest, he said this: as you see the unfolding tragedy in Syria, keep in mind, this is your tax dollars at work. This was brought to you by the United States government, the state of Israel, and Turkey. They said Assad was bad. This is what they replaced Assad with. And Danny Haiphong says, the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad will go down as a historic tragedy for Syria and the world. A tragedy sponsored by Turkey, Qatar, Israel, the U.S., and axis of empire, a genocide enabled by all those who cheered regime change in Syria. The blood falls at their feet, and he's retweeting this that says, according to some estimates, over 10,000 Alawites and Christians have been slaughtered in Syria.
Well, Hillary's email said that wouldn't be a bad thing.
And Syrian Christians fear they are next to be targeted on a large scale. Their warnings have largely fallen on deaf ears in the West. The UK has lifted the sanctions on Syria, including the central bank, in a landmark move that could be a turning point in Syria's devastated economy. Britain has become the first country to unfreeze all assets of the central bank of Syria. So they're 100% on board with Islamic fundamental terrorists, Al Qaeda and ISIS. The state,
Jimmy,
because we invented
Israel?
them for a reason. Go ahead.
Wait, remember they gave Iran's money back, and we have to worry they're going to attack Israel? You're giving it to Al Qaeda?
Yeah.
What if they go after Israel? They're hardcore Islamists.
Yeah, they're not doing that, Kurt. Isn't that weird that they're not? In fact, the state airline and state-owned oil companies are amongst other previously sanctioned entities removed from the sanctions list on Thursday afternoon. This approach underscores our commitment to help the people of Syria rebuild their country and economy, including through support for a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition process. That was the UK government said. We will continue to judge Syria's interim authorities by their actions, not their words. Okay, no, you're not. So this has nothing to do with helping the people of Syria. This has to do with Israel. This has to do with Qatar. This has to do with energy transfers. That's what this always has to do with. That's what it's happening. And they're slaughtering people now. Of course they are. And the United States is the responsible for this.
They already judged their actions in that tepid EU statement.
Yeah, there's one more. Craig Murray. So here's the headline from The Guardian. Entire families reported killed in fighting in northwest Syria, the UN says. He says The Guardian uses its appalling Israeli propaganda model on Syria. Hundreds of Alawite women and children, it says, were killed in fighting. No, they were murdered. They were massacred. They weren't killed in fighting. This isn't collateral damage. These are them going into their homes and slaughtering them. That's what this is. Alon Mizari says, I have to admit my previous ignorance. I had no idea what kind of monsters the Assad regime was fighting, armed, financed, and sent in by Turkey, Israel, and the Gulf states and the West to destroy Syria. For years, I thought it was at least partially a popular rebellion. What's unfolding in Syria in the last couple of days is close to a complete exoneration of Assad. Now we know the horror he and his regime were facing. The horror is what Barack Obama's Operation Timber Sycamore was intended to achieve in Syria. Mission accomplished, I guess. This is what Barack Obama started. This is what Joe Biden continued. This is right now what Trump is allowing to happen.
Do you think he'll make a Netflix movie about it, Obama?
Yeah, and it'll all be a lie. Here's one more I'll show you. Jolani, who is the head Al-Qaeda guy, now they call him HDS, are now executing Alawites by going door to door. They're being shot in the head. You can hear other executions in the background. This isn't counterterrorism. This is ethnic cleansing. Jolani regime supporters will claim all these publicly executed people were Assad regime remnants. So just so you know what you're in bed with. So if you're a MAGA or you're a Daily Wire viewer, this is what you're in. This is what the United States has invented, created, and is facilitating in Syria. And this is what people like Tulsi Gabbard, which is why I supported her when she ran for president, was the only person speaking the truth about. The only person. And that nitwit Barry Weiss, that tool of the Zionists and Benjamin Netanyahu, called her on Joe Rogan's show an Assadist and horrific and what did he call her?
Assad toady.
A toady, an Assad toady. And then
it's so bad she doesn't even know what it means. That's how bad of a word
it was. So bad she didn't even know what the word meant. She was just repeating it. So that's what your country. So I just want to make sure MAGA knows exactly what's happening in Syria, that the United States is in bed with Al-Qaeda, okay? The people who attacked us on 9/11.
I hope all the vets know. I hope people that lost their limbs in a 20-year thing we lost notice that we're now working with Al-Qaeda.
I guess it's okay to ethnic cleanse as long as the West backs you. I guess that's it.
Yeah, well, that's obvious. I think that's it's called the rules-based order, and that's like the golden rule.
I mean, radical Islamists are dangerous, except when the United States backs it, then it's okay.
Yeah, it's like when the ADL says you're not Nazis anymore. It means you're not Nazis.
Yeah. I know you have to go. Before I let you go, everybody's talking about Doge and Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio tweeted this out. After a 6-week review, we are officially canceling 83% of the programs at USAID. The 5,200 contracts that are now canceled spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve, and in some cases even harm, the core national interests of the United States. In consultation with Congress, we intend for the remaining 18% of programs we are keeping, approximately 1,000 of them, to now be administered more effectively under the State Department. Thank you to Doge and our hardworking staff who worked very long hours to achieve this overdue and historic reform. And here's Elon Musk. Tough but necessary, good working with you. The important part of USAID should always have been with the Department of State. What do you make of that? Now, as a lot of people say that Trump is still an imperialist and that he's just going to fold those programs into the State Department, and this is a big shell game. What do you make of what's happening with Doge right now?
Well, on USAID, it's really important to understand. USAID did some and was doing some life-saving things, getting malaria medicines to kids and so forth. But it began more and more doing terrible things, of just being another arm of regime change operations, of meddling in politics in other countries. That's what wrecked USAID, because it has actually a life-saving mission, but then it spoiled it by being an instrument of nefarious U.S. foreign policy in many places. And by nefarious, I mean meddling in the internal politics to the point of instigating deliberately regime change operations. So it really messed up. We should be saving lives, but we should not be overthrowing other governments.
So that's what's happening. I agree, because if it's with the Department of State, at least we have someone to hold accountable. USAID is a blob, a opaque organization. We don't know who's doing it, who's administering it, but we know what they are doing is they are spreading imperialism, and it's unaccounted for, right? And so USAID is just another arm of the CIA, and just like the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. None of these things are about democracy. We're in bed with dictators and we overthrow democracies. And so this is a positive. How it will turn out, we'll have to see. Okay, Jeffrey Sachs, I really appreciate you making time for our show today.
Of course.
Thanks for all the work you do, and hope to see you again soon.
Great, we'll do that. Thank you so much.
Okay, over to Steph.
All right, thank you. Okay, that was fantastic. So